But I think I probably should say hello to everybody. It's, I think hopefully a few more people join us, but I just wanted to thank Rhonda. She's going to be talking to us today about library tutorials from NimblyWise and Credo reference, and then look at really how we should be using them in the future. This, of course, ties into the priority that we've had over the past, since I've been here, to improve undergraduate education, and my real strategy that we've been trying to adopt of increasing the reach. So we know from places like Minnesota that if students can get library instruction, that they're more successful. It's on the side of our van, right? So if you've seen the New Brunswick mail van, you know that students who do have a chance to have library instruction are more successful. So this is so important, and I'm glad that Rhonda's taking the lead here and going to be, and Maria too. It's nice to see Maria here. I'm going to be talking to us today about what best we should do to make sure that we're making the most of everything here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rhonda.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Thank you. So yes, Maria and I collaborated to bring this to you, but we're not going to confuse you by going back and forth because this is already complicated. But I'm going to start to share my screen, and so you can, for a presentation, share. Yes, it says I am screen sharing. So yes, Maria very much has been the backbone really of rolling out these tutorials to you. So let's get right to it. Click, there we go. So since we're talking about instruction, we have some learning objectives that I thought I would share with you all. We want you to have a general knowledge of the tutorials that are available from our vendors. We want you to be able to access the details about the tutorials. Maria has prepared some excellent documentation, and there are some website resources. And together, we'll identify how the tutorials can be used in campus library instruction. So also, so that you have a good idea of where we're going and where we are on the journey there. First, I'll give an overview of the tutorials from our vendors, and that will be this presentation. Then we're going to break out into breakout rooms and talk about current library instruction at our campus libraries. We'll come back and do a little sharing. And then we're going to break out into more breakout rooms and talk about our aspirations for library instruction. And then we'll come back for a recap. All right. So first I'm going to talk about the vendor NimblyWise. We actually have two vendors. Some of you were involved a few years ago with investigating, replacing what was then called Riot. And that company kind of split up a little bit. So now we have two vendors that we get content from. And the one that's called NimblyWise gives us master courses on the topics of, in alphabetical order, communication, critical thinking, and information literacy. These tutorials are available in Blackboard, Canvas, and Sakai. And there is a grade passback in all of those learning management systems. So we're going to take a look at what it might look like. So it looks a little bit differently in each of the LMSs. This is what the communications master course looks like in Canvas. So you can see that this is under the modules. I might also interject here that we have placed all of these master courses in Canvas Commons so that you can, or instructors can, take a look at them there before you pull them into your course. So you can, this is just a screenshot of the top part of the topics for communication, written communication, oral communication, and so on. So this is what the critical thinking module looks like in Canvas. It begins with why thinking matters, goes on to research methodology, and so forth. All right, and no surprise, here is the information literacy master course in Canvas. Beginning with why information literacy matters, and then types of sources, and so on and so forth. So although all the campuses are moving over to Canvas, there are still many, many courses at Newark that are still on Blackboard. And so we have the information literacy, critical thinking, and communication courses available in Blackboard. And this is what it looks like in Blackboard. The same content is there, but of course, you know, it displays a little bit differently here. And you can see that it's under library tutorials in Blackboard. So information literacy matters, types of sources, scholarly materials, search techniques, and so on. And not to be outdone, Sakai, here's an example of what one of the lessons in critical thinking looks like. You know, we all have a love-hate relationship with Sakai, and this is no different. Sakai is a little clunky, and it's clunky for these tutorials too, but it still works. So here you can see that at the critical thinking lesson, you can see it listed in this course on the left column. And when you go to it, it just opens up to the first frame of that course. I want to say if you have, or any instructors have any issues with how it's working inside a course in any of the LMSs, Maria is an amazing resource and you should not hesitate to call on her. There's no question that's too big or too small to ask her. Okay. There's a lot of assessment data that is available. Inside a Canvas course, we can get assessment data about learning outcomes. So if you think of the ACRL framework, you can get information about learning outcomes related to the framework for the students in a course. And you can also get basic assessment data, i.e. scores. And that's inside the Canvas course. The instructor can get this data. For Blackboard, Canvas, and Sakai, there's an external site for the data. We have to actually go through the vendor site where we can get learning outcomes, assessment, engagement, think what sessions were used, and enrollment. Engagement, think of like how many sessions, student sessions and so forth, and enrollment, which sections used the tutorials, and number of learners and so forth. All right, so a few people are very familiar with this, and Maria and I can help you, and we also have Leslie's been, sorry Leslie, in New Brunswick has been really testing this out. She's very familiar with this too. So in New Brunswick, you have an extra resource. The other vendor is Credo Reference. And Credo Reference offers courses on health sciences and what they now call Core InfoLit. Some of you knew this as Instruct. Some of you knew this as On Demand. But the news today, if you haven't already heard, is that not only is this content available on the library's tutorials webpage, that NimblyWise content is not available on the website, only in the LMSs. This is available both on the website and in Canvas, but we have not made it available on Blackboard or Sakai. I will share these slides with you. I'll make them available to you. We'll put them up on our teaching and learning site and staff.libraries so that you'll be able to refer to them in case you start getting mixed up, because believe me, I totally understand that. Anything that's available in Canvas, there is the grade passback in Canvas, but also grades can be emailed from the tutorials webpage. And we just had an instructor contact us this last week about doing this, and when we explained to her what the students had to do, it's obvious, but it still doesn't hurt to tell them that. She reported back, "Thank you, it worked great." So, so yeah, we can still get grades passed back even if you're not using it in Canvas. So the health science master course in Canvas, here you see the portion about evidence-based practice. And here is the a screenshot for the Core InfoLit master course, getting started with research, why information literacy matters, life in the information age. There is overlap with content that we get from NimblyWise, but not duplication of coverage. So in fact, we tried to parse out where there's overlap, and it's not really easy because they combine things differently by each vendor. So a few things like why information literacy matters is pretty much the same from both vendors, but others like academic integrity in one and plagiarism in another, there's not the same coverage in each of the lessons. So I wish we could give that to you, but if you have any questions, you can just ask us and we'll try to work through it with you. So assessment for Credo reference through the vendor site, it's basically the same. Through the vendor site, we can get the learning outcomes, assessment, engagement, and enrollment. And we can also get the assessment and engagement statistics for the website tutorials through the vendor site. We haven't yet worked through all of the kinks with the in-course assessment in Canvas, but we hope to be able to report out that that's working very soon. Am I right on that, Maria?
Yes, maybe, hopefully we'll get some resolution maybe by tomorrow, but we'll see. So
yes,
we're gently pushing
very
them.
soon.
They're responding, so.
Yes, yes. Okay. We have documentation. Thank you, Maria. Maria prioritizes documentation, thankfully. On the staff resources site, we have a whole section for the NimblyWise and Credo reference tutorials. And there is a LibGuide that gives detailed information about the content in all of the tutorials. Okay, so I think I will stop here and ask if you have any questions before we go into our breakout rooms.
Rhonda, I don't know if you can see.
I'm
I
going to stop screen sharing so that I can see you. Hello, stop screen sharing. Yay, okay.
So I'm just curious. We've had this in place for a bit over a year now. Time is liquid, maybe even into the 2 years, fluid. But what has the feedback been from the librarians? And I suppose if we have student feedback, but as far as the content and how it's working with the courses, and is it engaging? I way back in the beginning, I clicked through to see some of the tutorials, but I really haven't played with them, so to speak. So I'm just wondering, how are we doing this far into it?
Sure. The first year was really rocky, I have to say. We were trying to get it integrated into the courses. Like I said, it was working differently in all 3 of the LMSs. And so that was a little bit challenging, not just for us, but also for our vendors and also for the LMS administrators to understand why we were asking them to change things as we got to know the content. The most success that we also had some issues with the assessment because the vendors thought they had given us sufficient information, for example, to integrate it, and it turns out that they didn't realize that they hadn't given us the LTI links and so forth. So yeah, no wonder. And then, there were certain things, ways we wanted it set up. For example, in allowing 2 attempts for a question on a quiz instead of just 1. When you have a 5-question quiz and you get 3 of them wrong, that's really bad, right? We had some good discussions with librarians who told us that this should be a learning experience and not a testing experience. So we changed that. So I will say that our most successful use has been when there's a librarian champion who is willing to engage deeply with this and work with the instructors to get it into the courses, and especially with those that are very research intensive and address these particular topics. Would anybody else like to talk about success or struggles, challenges? Okay. Were there any other questions about this? Okay. One of the things that was mentioned at a recent meeting was that librarians especially really want to be able to talk with each other across campuses about what they're doing and to hear each other. So when it came to talking about instruction, we thought it would be a great idea to help to facilitate that. So what we're going to do is to start and go into, there we go. I'm sorry, my other monitor just went blank, so, but it's back. Go into breakout rooms, and I'll share my screen again, and we'll show you the breakout room. The first one is, what are we doing now? Okay, and Each one of the breakout rooms has a facilitator from Central. This is a person who very clearly is not involved with instruction, so there's no question about their role. They are there to facilitate and not to dictate. They will help you get the discussion started if you need help, and they will take notes. We have some discussion prompts for you in case you're wondering how to get started. Who's doing library instruction on your campus? Who's asking you for library instruction? How are you delivering it? What's working best for you? We also have a Google Docs document that all of the breakout rooms will be contributing to. You will be able to see everything that is on that document from all of the rooms. No hiding information. We're all sharing. We can all share ideas. And your facilitators will be making notes on that. And if you want to correct their spelling, that would be fine. Or if you just want to engage in the discussion, that's fine too. Okay. Are there any questions before we send you to your breakout room? You have about 10 minutes, right, Joanne?
That's right. It'll be 10 minutes. I'm going to post right now the link to the first Google Share document in the chat.
So Maria and I will be floating around, and we will, I hope we get to drop in on all 6 of the breakout rooms in case you have any questions or want to share something with us, or we'll just listen for a minute and then move on. Okay. And Joanne is going to give you a 60-second countdown at the end. So, and then you'll be pulled back in. Good. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's just take a couple of minutes or a minute to share a highlight or two from your room. Okay, so I'm just going to call on facilitators. Matt, share something.
All right. Well, I think overall there were lots of similar themes, but as we've come to expect, there's a different flavor on each of the campuses. For instance, in New Brunswick, there's a pretty robust program of graduate students who are involved in delivering instruction, which may not necessarily be the case on some of the other campuses. I'm seeing lots of, in terms of delivering the instruction, there's a large variety. There's synchronous, there's asynchronous. People seem to be using the tools, Rhonda, that you were speaking about, but in kind of like a modular way. So they sort of pick and choose and incorporate into their instruction the pieces that work for them. And then there seems to, again, it really runs the gamut between things like a one-shot instruction session to like librarians fully embedded in courses and things like seminars and that. So a wide variety is, I guess, what I picked up from my group.
Great. Antonio, a highlight from your group?
I'll be brief since I think Matt echoed a lot of the same kind of things. I think some of the things that they bubbled up is there are a lot of similarities in the programs and how they're handling things, that sometimes when it is based at program level, it seems to work the best. I guess the interaction that they have with the program versus individual instructors can sometimes be more supportive. Let's see, just trying to pick on something that's a little bit different.
That's okay. Okay.
We can go to the next person.
Yeah. Laura.
Sorry, Tracy was the facilitator for my group.
Tracy?
Okay, gotcha. I couldn't get back to the screen because I was on the notes page. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Okay, so in my group, one of the things that they said worked well for them We really didn't get a lot of time to explore the last question, but asking for feedback was one of the ways, because in the courses where everybody has a different research topic, they can't specifically address each student's needs. So when the students come back to them for more specific help for their topic, they can tell how well people paid attention in the general course that they taught. So I thought that part was interesting. And then the other thing was, in delivering the instruction, everybody's using all the different modalities: WebEx, Zoom, LMSs, videos that they specifically create, and the Credo online tutorials. And one person noted that the Credo evidence-based modules aren't exactly the way the librarians are teaching their courses. But when the faculty need more specific information, they can sometimes point to specific modules that can be helpful. This is particularly in the medical education area. That was
Great.
Notes.
Yeah, that's interesting. Abby.
We're starting to get to the bottom of the well a little bit, but
That's okay.
repeating stuff. But one of the things also in the medical education area that I thought was an interesting use of the modules is when they get a request for a consultation from a student, they're actually using the modules to help educate the student in advance of the consultation, to make sure that they come in with like a base level of understanding, to make the conversation and the time spent more enriched, and just a little bit of a different shake on some of the other stuff that we've heard. So I thought that was a unique part of our conversation.
Yes, that's good. Good observation. Amy.
I was just going to bring up the same thing as something
Okay.
that was unique to our group. So yeah, something that bubbled up again from health sciences was the idea of potentially flipping the classroom a bit, having students come prepared, because, and a few people in the group brought up the fact that it's really the open discussion time that is the most useful, seems to be, for the students. So, you know, these modules would make a lot of sense for that type of model, where the students come ready to have that discussion. So yeah, otherwise a lot of similar points to the rest.
Okay. Jeff.
Yeah, and we're clearly building on what everybody is saying, but I think the unique thing from our group was, and it kind of came out at the end, we wrapped it up as a time element. So everybody's pressed for time. A lot of the tutorials, they take up quite a bit of time, and many are very basic. So there's a desire to want to be able to customize them or edit them. And I think another thing that also came up was whether a student's taking a course or tutorial is counts for anything in the course that they're taking. And whether there's a way for faculty to be able to provide that kind of information.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It sounds like there was some really interesting conversations going on there. It also sounds like you're ready to go to our next breakout room, and the topic for that, which is aspirations. So the discussion prompts for that, and Joanne will be putting in the link to the notes document for this breakout session. The discussion prompts: how would you like to expand and promote library instruction? How can central units support library instruction? You know I was going to ask that question. And what additional instruction content would you like to have? So I think that with that, we will send people to your next breakout session. Okay, we're back. Hi, everybody. So I let time get away from me. I'm sorry. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to call on you to give me only one thing from your group, so you don't steal the show from all the groups. Oh, bye, Dee. Thanks for coming. Okay, so I'm going to start with Abby.
Sorry, I was copy pasting notes.
Okay.
I think that there was a little bit of hesitation at the idea of expanding and promoting instruction because there's concerns about our capacity.
That's a good observation. Thank you. Okay, Amy.
Yeah, capacity concerns here too. Let's see. Some additional content that was desired, since that was a question, something about writing. So advice about editing and things like that, and also statistics were thought to be lacking.
Great, thank you, thank you. Jeff, can you add to that?
Yep. So the one thing I'll pull out of the discussion was tools. It's either a lack of tools or a lack of awareness of the existing tools. So somewhere in there.
Okay, good, thank you. Antonio.
So we had a specific program that someone was interested in trying to make sure as a dream that people and undergrads were aware of. So I kind of changed it so it was a little less specific, but in terms of expanding and promoting library instruction, every undergraduate student graduates knowing what services RUL offers and how to make use of those services. So essentially just getting right at the core of what library instruction is intended to do.
Great, that's good ideas. Tracy.
Okay, in our group, one of the main topics was continuing to embed in programs to reach more students and to be embedded in more specific programs.
Great ideas. Matt, is there anything you can add to that?
Sure, I would just say that probably the biggest theme from, or at least that I took away from my group, was that with the exception of being additional specialized content, it's not necessarily a lack of content that's the issue, but how do we connect people to that content, whether it's through promoting or embedding, like some of the other groups said. That really seems to be the challenge, is just connecting people to the content that already exists.
Okay, those are all great, great observations. So what I'm going to do now is through the magic of backstage work, through backstage magic, I'm going to share with you some of the highlights from both of our breakout sessions. Of course, we know the magician is Joanne. So thank you, Joanne, for capturing these highlights from breakout session number 1 and breakout session number 2. I'll just leave this here for a moment so that you can take it all in. Like I said, we will be sharing these slides with all of you, as well as the content from the notes documents. All right. We are pretty much at time here. First of all, I want to thank all of you for your active participation and for sharing so openly. But does anybody want to add anything? Okay, I know that our next meetings and events are calling us. So again, I want to thank you all for coming. I hope you got something out of this. Remember to refer to our documentation, contact us. There's also the email instructional_support@libraries.rutgers.com. Maria, Laura, and I are on the other side of that. And so far, we've been able to get questions answered and get people the help that they need. So thank you very much for attending. Bye.
Thank you.